Legacy to me is the ultimate measure of whether or not you've succeeded. Did you create generational wealth? That is winning in business. My main goal is to just develop a relationship in person with the people we serve. So we have clients literally all across the country, all different businesses, 18 different industries, and that's what we gave the attendees. This is a true mastermind.
The amount of knowledge, it's almost hard to keep up with, but it's super interesting if you really care about protecting your assets and developing the legacy.
UpLevel is your resource for that. Whether that's UpLevel University, whether that's UpLevel Protege, whether that's UpLevel Elite. We have a variety of different programs.
It was the best financial decision that we as a company have ever made. When you come to the event and you listen in person, Ed was very passionate. It's very contagious, so it gives you the desire to actually take your step and move forward.
We create this ecosystem where you can actually have conversations that are candid and raw and real.
Edward is building this community. Seems to be very special. He genuinely wants you to succeed.
Genuine person who's honest and extremely knowledgeable.
My experience is transformational.
But seriously, Edward's team is amazing. Whatever they say, they are always right. 100%, I'm an unapologetic capitalist.
Hello, hello, hello. Talk about unapologetic capitalism. I'm excited that we're here today. We're going to talk about some capitalistic type of conversations today. I know that there's, well, first and foremost, let me say this. I hope each and every one of you had an amazing Labor Day weekend. Typically, Labor Day is an opportunity to celebrate those who go out into the workforce ecosystem and labor away their days in order to add value to the context of what we have going on here in the United States. But I sort of celebrate those individuals who make the labor ecosystem even possible in the first place, and that's the entrepreneurial landscape. But today, what we are going to be talking about is this concept of one of the pillars of generational wealth. But before I get into that, I really want to start off by just taking us down a quick little journey of where things stand today with regard to the political ecosystem and the economy, and how these two things are not necessarily playing well with one another. Specifically, Trump and Powell. The current situation, the landscape that is unfolding, I think it's pretty hard for anyone to argue that things are going smoothly between the current presidential administration and one of the avenues that it has to rely upon in order to make sure that the economy is working well, and that's the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, if you've watched any of my content up until now, and again, I'm not sure how many people on this live session have consumed my content, but if you have consumed my content, you know that I legitimately hate the government. I'm pretty vocal about it. Like, I love America, so don't get me wrong. I think America is the most amazing country in the world. It's just I believe the government is fundamentally corrupt. I think there's a ridiculous situation that exists between the current government and the people. I think there's been this loss of understanding as to where the power actually resides. Remember, it's a government for the people and by the people. And sometimes, at least from my perspective, it doesn't feel that way. Now, I recognize that I get a lot of hate on social media, specifically because I am an unapologetic capitalist. And a lot of people argue against capitalism and talk about how greed is evil and how capitalism is evil. And my position is this: like, if you don't love capitalism, I don't understand why you stick around here. Like, there's other places that you can go, but again, I'm not trying to get too political on this particular live session, but I do at least want to share my perspective, because I think it is important to understand the bias of the individuals who you're listening to, right? Because whether you agree with them or don't, at least understanding their bias helps you to really have some perception into the color of why they're talking about what they're talking about, right? Like what is the basis upon their value systems, their belief structures, all are situated so that it can help you understand and weigh the context of what they share. So I'm always upfront. I'm always upfront with regard to what my biases are. And the significant bias for me is capitalism. Like, I am an unapologetic capitalist. But I'm also an unapologetic capitalist who hates the government. I don't believe that taxation is theft. I think taxation is extortion because the IRS has guns, right? There's consequences to not paying what they want and what they demand. So with that being said, because I also take a position where I believe in the rule of law, I believe that in order to win at any game that you're playing, you must understand the rules of the game, which is why over the course of the past nearly 3 decades, I've dedicated my life to really learning the rules of the game of capitalism, really understanding the context of the legal basis of things, understanding the context of process, procedure, understanding the context of regulations, all of which inform what decisions need to be made if your goal and objective is winning, right? And again, I don't want to try to layer my goal and objective on you, but my goal and objective is to win, right? I have no interest in second place because second place is just first loser, right? So I'm always interested in winning. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been very, very fortunate in life, right? There have been a lot of blessings that have come my way, but I've also seized upon those opportunities as they've passed. Now, not every single opportunity, unfortunately. I've definitely missed out on some opportunities that have come, but I've taken the position that it's critically important to be constantly aware that opportunities are out there, because if you're not looking for them, it is very easy to miss. And the reason I'm saying it this way is because today's discussion is about a potential opportunity that is quite literally just around the corner. Many have been following some of the political ridiculousness that has been going on over the past number of months. Since Trump has been in office, there's been a significant contingent going against Trump, and that's understandable, right? Like, if you think about individuals who have voted here in the United States, close to half voted against Trump, and a little more than half voted for him. So it's understandable that there's a large number of human beings that don't necessarily agree with the policy initiatives that the current president has. Totally understand that. But what's interesting to note is that when it comes to the economy, policy initiatives inform economic decision-making processes, right? So when we're talking about the landscape that is the current economy, it is hard to evaluate that without understanding this concept of interest rates, right? Interest rates. Now, in the United States, we have this ecosystem, this culture around how our interest rates are set. And it's really informed by an entity called the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, again, obviously, throughout my discussion with you guys, some of my bias is going to bleed through. It's going to be hard for me to stop that. So again, you know my position. I hate the government. I love America. So I want to inform as many of us Americans out there how the system really works, so that you can learn those rules of the game and start playing to win. Because this is my fundamental belief. I believe that the government is not coming to save you or I. It should, but it's not. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us to save ourselves. And the best way to position ourselves for that type of outcome is to learn how the system actually works, learn the rules of the game so that you can start playing to win. And when we look at the Federal Reserve Bank, it's an oxymoron if I've ever heard one, right? Like, Federal Reserve Bank is it's not federal, right? The federal government doesn't actually own it. It's private, quasi-private entity. It's not a reserve. There's no cash that's sitting on the sidelines inside that institution, right? And it's not a bank. You and I can't walk over to the Federal Reserve and open up an account with it, right? But the Federal Reserve Bank does set significant monetary policy initiatives, and it does so by affecting something called the overnight lending rate. And it is this quasi-government entity that has two initiatives. The first initiative is really to stabilize employment, right? To keep the employment ecosystem operational so that we have close to full employment. That's a goal or objective. And the other objective is to balance out this concept called inflation, right? To keep inflation in check. And its overarching initiative is to have inflation operate in somewhere around that 2% ecosystem. That's its target inflation rate. And we're currently in 2025 at the moment. And for many years, since COVID really came in and beat up the global economy, inflation has been a bit out of whack as of late, right? Like there was significant influx of dollars into the economy through policy initiatives, right? And those dollars went into an ecosystem where there was not necessarily a significant expansion in goods and or services during that same time. So you had more dollars for, I'd argue, less than, but at least the same amount of goods and services. And pretty much anyone who's gone through any basic economies type of class, right, economics class, they understand that when you have a supply of something and a limited quantity of something else, the cost of the limited quantity item tends to go up, right? It's just supply-demand balances and imbalances. And when we look at what happened in the United States, specifically over the course of the past number of years, there was significant influx of new dollars through economic policy decisions, not based on actual growth of the economy. So new dollars came in because the government simply deployed more capital into the ecosystem. And that deployment of capital created a significant amount of cash, which again, in the limited services and goods type of ecosystem, meant that prices went up. That's an inflationary process. Now, there's a lot more that goes into what actually drives inflation. I'm keeping it obviously extremely surface level in this discussion, mainly because we don't have 17 weeks to go through a true economics course on this particular YouTube Live. However, when we understand it, at least at a cursory level, high 30,000 foot view, if you will, looking down, we can see that if the Fed has a mandate to keep inflation around 2%, and if inflation in actuality has gone significantly higher than that, which, again, looking at pretty much everything in the rearview mirror, it's hard to argue that inflation wasn't out of control for a while there. It's understandable that the actions of the Fed have been to try to keep this ecosystem running more smoothly than not. And it did so through controlling this overnight lending rate. And it did so by raising those rates. Now, the overnight lending rate is a pretty complicated concept, but I'm gonna make it as simple as I possibly can. Now, this explanation that I'm gonna go into is not precise. But it's not precise on purpose. It's really just to give you a general understanding of the concept. And again, it is much, much more complicated than I'm going to share. But in essence, what the overnight lending rate is, it's the Fed's ability to lend money out to the banking infrastructure that's here in the United States, FDIC insured banks, Federal Reserve related bank ecosystems. And what there is a requirement for each individual financial institution to have a certain amount of capital available for deposit demands, right? Individuals who want to come and withdraw capital from that particular institution. They have to have a certain amount of reserves on hand. And when they don't have those reserves, they go out and they borrow them. And they have the opportunity to go either to the public markets, meaning borrowing from other financial institutions, or borrowing from the Fed. And when the Fed has an interest rate that's this overnight lending rate, the borrowing process for a bank tends to be eased when the Federal Reserve interest rate, the overnight lending rate, is lower, right? Because the bank has the ability to go out and borrow the money at a lower cost. When the Federal Reserve raises that overnight lending rate, it costs a financial institution more to borrow that needed capital. And the reality is that doesn't get borne entirely by the financial institution, like most systems are that are capitalist. That institution, meaning the bank, passes on those added costs to its customer base in the form of interest rates that are for consumer-related goods, whether that's auto loans, whether that's mortgages, whether that's credit cards, right? All of those types of interest rates that consumers pay are the byproduct of what the banks pay to get access to capital when they need it, right? So there's this by relationship process. Now, again, it's much more complicated than I just described, right? So hopefully you understand that. But my goal and objective is not to make you an expert in Fed policy and the banking ecosystem and the economy. But I do want to give you at least high level concepts so that you can take this information and run with it, right? Now, if you're on this live session right now, and let's say it is live, and you're not watching the recording after the fact, you're here live with us today. If you're on this live, you're probably here because you saw some sort of advertisement for this particular live. Maybe it was a thumbnail on my YouTube channel. Maybe it was a post that I put over on our other social media channels, whether it was our TikTok channel, our Facebook channel, our Instagram channel, whatever it may be. But what possibly drew you here was the fact that I was going to talk about Trump and Powell, because it was pretty hard pressed to watch any type of news over the course of the past couple of months and not see the two of them pretty much at each other, right? Like it is hard to argue that they don't argue against it, the fact that they don't like each other. It's very evident to anyone who watches them that they are not best friends. I don't know if they ever were, but they're definitely not now. And there's been a lot of like editorializing on some of the stuff that gets said. Now, regardless of whether you love Trump or hate Trump, or whether you love Powell or hate Powell, both of them have been very vocal about their positions. Some a little bit more coherent than others. But in the grand scheme of things, we see that these two very diametrically, at least seemingly diametrically opposed individuals at the moment are pushing us into some realities with regard to what's going to transpire for the economy in a very short period of time, right? So President Trump has come out arguing for interest rates to be cut, meaning the Federal Reserve Bank going through the process of cutting the overnight lending rates. And a lot of the reasoning behind that is Trump is looking, at least I'm making some assumptions here because I don't know what Trump thinks personally. I've not spent time with him, and he's definitely not given me any calls or sent me any personalized Twitter or X or whatever posts or Trump social posts or Truth Social posts, I guess is what his platform is. So I don't have any direct context specifically from him, but I can read between the lines with regard to what I'm seeing. Like, Trump is looking for the economy to start to stimulate and improve dramatically from where it is today. Don't get me wrong, it's actually pretty darn reasonable as of late. But with any president, whoever would be in office, they'd be looking for the economy to continually be improved, especially given the fact that next year, in 2026, it is a midterm election year, which has some significant issues that come to the forefront with regard to what's going to happen politically, with regard to who's in control of both the House and the Senate in that midterm ecosystem. So Trump is looking for wins, just like any president would be. Where again, I mean, let's just be honest, no matter who it is, they want the economy to be doing well so that the population that votes is not necessarily going to vote them and or their party out of control. And again, this is very logical. Most individuals who would be in the same position would be interested in the economy doing well. Powell, on the other hand, has come out pretty vocally, arguing against cutting rates, at least for now. Mainly, again, there's lots of reasons that have been proposed, but mainly pointing at uncertainty with regard to the economy, specifically in the face of the tariff ecosystem that has pretty much overshadowed Trump's policy initiatives for the past number of months, right? And the impact that tariffs could potentially have on the broader economy. And Powell constantly arguing that we really don't know yet the extent of that impact. And these two very opposed positions are essentially being battled out in front of cameras, right? Like you have Trump talking pretty negatively, openly about the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve chairman talking in such a way sort of to imply that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about with regard to why things are happening the way they're happening at the Federal Reserve Bank. And because of this, the market has been watching, saying, we don't know what's going on. And anytime the market sees uncertainty, you get volatility in markets, whether we're talking about the equity markets, the fixed income markets, the broader market in general, right? Like companies making business decisions, investors making investment decisions. The markets tend to be volatile when there's a lot of uncertainty with regard to what's about to happen, right? And for the past couple of months, there has been significant uncertainty. Now, if you look at data that has been now not only put forth, but also revised data from prior periods, we've started to see that the economic data that is typically used to make decisions related to overnight lending rates, the interest rate that the Federal Reserve Bank controls, that data is seeming to signal that rate cuts should happen, right? And that's what a lot of the argument has been. Trump has been saying this for a long time, and it seems as though now that data is coming out and prior data is being revised, we're starting to see that what Trump has been saying, at least in some context, has been pretty much on point. And a lot of smarter people than me, right? A lot of smarter people than me have been saying then that it is highly probable that at the next Federal Reserve Board meeting, where they go in and they analyze the data and they make decisions, right, which happens September 16th and 17th, at the next Federal Reserve Board meeting, we're going to see rate cuts. And the markets, they typically evaluate what the probabilities of these decisions being. And right now, if you look at the financial markets, you can see that the market is sort of estimating that a 90% probability that interest rates will be cut by 25 basis points. So 0.25%, 25 basis points. And that's what seems to be being priced into the market, right? Now, there are some people, again, much smarter than me, that are arguing that that is not even close to accurate, that it's going to need a much more aggressive rate cut than 25 basis points. Whereas others are saying, well, there's no rate cut coming, at least not for the next one. But even if there's not a rate cut in September, again, my personal position is that it will be nearly impossible for the Fed not to cut rates at the October meeting, which happens right at the end of October of 2025. So October 28th and 29th is the next Federal Reserve Board meeting after the September meeting. Again, I'm saying this based on my analysis of the actual financial data. Right. I'm not really as influenced by the words that politicians or bureaucrats say on camera, right? Because the vast majority of those individuals are saying it not for the actual end result. Typically, they're saying it for a political motive, right? And my position has always been that politics does not move the economy. Policy does. Policy does. So what's interesting to note is that the policy decisions that the Fed makes is made, in theory, independent of politics, right? The Fed is supposed a nonpartisan entity. It's not supposed to be making political-based policy decisions. It's making in theory, it's supposed to make economic-based policy decisions. And what seems to be playing out is that is not necessarily the case, right? If you look at prior Fed decisions, the vast majority of those Fed's decisions have been truly weighted in the actual data that has come up prior to the Fed meeting, whereas a lot of the commentary that Powell has been making over the past couple of months has been projecting what a belief system is with regard to what the economy is going to face in the near future. And that has been the reasoning behind not making Fed cuts, at least up until this point. Again, I'm oversimplifying what has been transpiring amongst these two juggernauts, if you will, that move the media cycle, right? Trump versus Powell, right? And this situation that's been developing is really quite interesting in that you're sitting back, again, if you've been watching politics and policy for any number of years, you sit back and you see how impactful the ridiculousness is on the markets because of the uncertainty, right? And think about your own situation. Like how many of you individually, if you're watching this live, if you wouldn't mind jumping into the chat, have you held off on making a decision related to investing, or whether that's in your company, whether that's buying real estate, whether that's in your own financial portfolios? Have you put off making a decision over the course of the past couple of months because of what's going on in politics? Say yes or no. Let me know in the chat. Yes or no. Have you put off making a decision because of the ridiculousness that seems to be transpiring, unfolding with regard to politics over the course of the past couple of months? I'm curious. Yeah. Big Success says, heck yeah. Ang says, yes. Yeah, 31% of all outstanding debt needs to be refinanced within the next year. Yeah, so Michael, you're precisely correct. And that's some of the reasoning behind why I think Trump is making such a heated argument for rate cuts to happen. Why? Because right now, a lot of you guys may not really understand this. And I'm not saying that to be in any way paternalistic or patronizing in any way. I'm saying it because we don't get taught this stuff in school. Like, let me know in the chat, did you get any type of financial literacy in traditional education ecosystem? Like, did you actually learn financial literacy in school? Yes or no? Yes or no? Did you learn financial literacy in school? Did you learn to become a truly financially literate person in school? Yes or no? I'm curious in the chat. Curious in the chat. Yep, not at all. Anthony says no. Nope. Yeah, and the problem with it is because you don't get taught some of this stuff, we hear things in the media and we can't really contextualize it, right? So let me give you an example. Right now in the United States, we have a debt infrastructure that is ridiculous, like a debt burden on our country, to the tune of greater than $37 trillion. That's trillion with a T, guys. That's a really big number. But the problem is, because we don't understand it, we don't get taught this in school, we can't contextualize trillion. So let me put it into context for you. Let's assume for the moment, because I like giving examples. So I'm gonna write this so that you guys have something that you could do at home. If Edward Collins was to pay you a dollar, right? I'm going to give you $1 for every second, right? $1 for every 1 second that passes, right? So I'm going to give you $1 for every 1 second that passes. So $1 for every 1 second that passes. How long do you think it would take me for me to pay you $1 million, right? If I were to give you $1 for every second that passed, how long would it take for me to, in terms of time, for me to pay you $1 million? If it was $1 per second, how long would it take? Well, it would take about 12 days to get to $1 million, right? Right, 12 days. If I were to pay you $1 for every second that passed, how long would it take you to get to $1 billion? 1 billion, do you think? Again, same scenario. Pay you $1 for every second that passed. Well, it would take you about 32 years, approximately years, right? As you can tell, I failed penmanship. I failed penmanship. Take you about 32 years. 32 years. 32 years. Right? How long would it take you to get to $1 trillion? Same scenario. $1 per second. Take about 32,000 years. That's the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. And we have more than $37 trillion of debt. And the problem is the interest costs, the cost of that debt every year is nearly $1 trillion. Well, $1 trillion. $1 trillion. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting there. And when interest rates are high and we have to refinance the debt that's outstanding, because our debt isn't all at one time, right? It gets issued over time, and in certain amounts of that debt cycle, we have to refinance it, which means in order to pay off the debt that's currently outstanding, we have to issue new debt. And when we issue the new debt, it's at new interest rates. And if the interest rates are higher than what they were, that means the cost of carrying the debt increases, which is a burden on our economy. And that is significant. That is significant. And when we look at the things that drive a president to want to reduce interest rates, it's not just to improve the current economy, but it's to improve the landscape for the economy going out decades, because the cost to carry the debt that's outstanding. So I understand some of the motivation that could go behind why a president, regardless of who the president is, would want to argue for interest rates to be lower than what they are now, simply because of the reality of having to refinance debt, right? I get that. And that is just one aspect of a policy which impacts the broader economy. There's so many more aspects of it, right? The ability to go out and get dollars to invest in your businesses, to invest in real estate, right? Like access to capital at lower cost to access gives the opportunity for people to participate in the economy and thereby stimulate the economy, right? Going out and buying goods and services potentially has stimulative effects. So I understand it. But you have these two juggernauts, Trump and Powell, who are at odds with each other regarding what they believe should happen, specifically with regard to interest rates. I personally believe that it'll be nearly impossible for the Fed to not cut rates in the next few weeks, just based on all of the information that's coming out with regard to the economy. That's my personal position. That's my belief system. And because of that, I have to look at like what's going on right now. Like, so as an example, a lot of people argue, well, why doesn't Trump just fire Powell, right? Like Trump disagrees with him, why not just fire him? Well, remember, the Federal Reserve is not an actual governmental agency. It's a quasi-governmental entity. It's really private by nature, right? And the Supreme Court earlier this year, back, I believe it was in May, sort of hinted at the fact that Trump just can't fire Powell specifically because of policy disagreements. He can't do that. I mean, Trump can't do that. The Supreme Court essentially argued that fact, which is why, again, so that's backdrop, that's context, right? Which informs some of the other stuff that's happening. Like, so for instance, I don't know if you've watched the news over the course of the past few weeks where Trump went and he visited the Federal Reserve. Like, did you see that? Did anyone see that news cycle where Trump went? I mean, it was pretty hard. It was like it was plastered everywhere, especially the interchange that happened live when Trump was at the location and Powell was there, and Trump was making commentary and Powell was trying to correct the commentary in real time. Like, did anyone watch that? Let me know in the chat. Did you see that unfold? Did you see that unfold? Because the Federal Reserve has spent money in renovating some of its buildings, right? Some of its infrastructure, right? And Trump has basically made commentary that he believes that investment has been mismanaged by the Fed, specifically by Powell. And it's interesting to note a possible motivation behind that commentary is that Trump may be looking for a different way to terminate Powell, not based on policy disagreement, but based on gross negligence, right? That, like, again, you have to understand context, understand the lens through which different people see the world and what informs the commentary they're making. Like Trump making statements in one way, you sort of can understand what's motivating that particular line of statements. The Supreme Court told him he couldn't fire Powell because of policy disagreements. So maybe he's looking for a different context in which he can fire Powell. Like gross mismanagement of Federal Reserve dollars, right? Their financial ecosystem for renovating buildings, right? Maybe that could be a motivation, because it was a very interesting, very interesting exchange between these individuals if you watch that in real time. But again, regardless, you and I, as consumers, as individual investors, as business owners, right? A lot of individuals who watch my channel are entrepreneurs here in the United States. They're high income business owners. They're high income real estate investors, right? If that's you, and if you're anything like me, I'm watching this stuff unfold and I'm trying to read between the lines because I want to know what decisions I need to make, right? What decisions do I need to make in order to improve my odds of winning at this game, right? The game of money, the game of business, right? I want to win. So I'm watching this stuff unfold and I'm saying, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to do in order to take advantage of what potentially is coming right down the road? And I do believe that it'll be very difficult for the Fed not to cut rates. Now, whether that happens in September or at the end of October, relatively speaking, that's close enough in time to me where I am today so that I can start making decisions with regard to how to best deploy my capital, right? I've learned, again, I've been doing what I do for nearly 30 years, right? I own multiple companies. I own a private wealth management firm. I own an accounting practice. I own a fractional CFO company. I own a consulting firm. I own real estate, residential, commercial real estate. I'm saying all this not to be braggadocious, right? I'm sharing with you that I'm academically trained in the languages of business and money. And I have practical experience putting that knowledge to work. I'm also a lawyer. I specialize in tax, estate, and business law, right? I am well-versed in the language of business and money. And I put that information to work in my own life daily. And I help business owners all across the country do the exact same thing. And I've been doing that for decades, right? So I share this the way I do. And I decided to jump into this live because I don't think enough of us entrepreneurs, right? I don't think enough of us are really paying attention to what's going on. And I think because of that, we have the opportunity to allow another great opportunity to pass us by. Because most of the time we react instead of being proactive, Right? We react instead of being proactive. And the problem with reacting to economic information is that it usually leaves a lot of value on the table. Right? You miss out on opportunity when you're in a reaction mode as opposed to a proaction mode. Right? And I'm sharing this in YouTube to do a few things. One, to document what I'm saying. Right? I want to share with you so that as months go by, you can come back and watch this video and see whether or not I was right or wrong, right? Or was I off by a few weeks or by a few months? What's the deal, right? To give it some firm, concrete rooting, if you will, in what I'm sharing. And two, to give you at least my perspective, my informed perspective, my professionalized perspective, so that you could do what you want with it, right? At the end of the day, I can't make you do anything. I'm hopeful that the information I share you find of value, but that you don't just listen to it, that you actually make decisions. Right? You go back to the people who are in your life, who you trust, who do provide personalized counsel to you. Right? Like I have a whole ecosystem of business owners that I help on a regular basis. Right? Like we have private communities, we have programs, I have private clients, et cetera. So I give them that value. Whoever that is for you, I would hope you go back to them and say, hey, listen, I was listening to this crazy guy on a YouTube live session, and he was sharing this information with regard to the fighting that's going on between President Trump and Chairman Powell. And he started to comment about the fact that there's a possibility of an interest rate cut on the horizon. What do you think we should do about that? Like, what changes should we consider? What initiatives should we consider? What structural modifications should we consider as this potentially starts to unfold? And ask, right? Because otherwise, you're going to sit here and a number of months have gone by, and you're going to be like, I might have missed out on a great opportunity to take advantage of the reality of economics, right? So I'm sharing this. So hopefully, not only do you get the information, you go back to the people you trust in your life and start asking the right type of questions. Not can I do X, Y, and Z, but how can I do X, Y, and Z, right? Enlist those trusted advisors that you have to sit on the same side of the table as you and strategize towards better outcomes. And if you're not doing that regularly already, I mean, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? No one's coming to save you. No one's coming to save you. And listen, I didn't come from a wealthy family, guys. Growing up, my family had to work really hard just to get up to the poverty line. So everything I learned about money was wrong. Like, life taught me way more about truth in the context of finances than my family did, right? Because my family just wasn't educated. Like, we didn't know what money was all about. And it wasn't until later in life when I was actually out in the real world and I was finally lucky enough to find myself in front of mentors, individuals who were willing to give me a helping hand and to essentially showcase to me the right paths to take, the right steps to take to avoid the potholes, and actually how to capitalize on the opportunities that came my way, that I was able to take myself way out of that poverty realm. Right? Because here's the truth, and you may not want to hear this, and I understand why, because it's hard for us to take responsibility over life. But here's the truth. If you did not come from a wealthy family, it is your responsibility to ensure a wealthy family comes from you. Right? That just is what it is. Whether you want to hear it or not, I'm sharing it. Right? So it's up to you to decide, are you going to be the person who it takes to be so that you can get the outcomes that you desire in life? Right? Like you have to, I have this whole philosophy. Again, I teach this to my mentees. I call it the law of prerequisites, right? You can't wait to become the person to start acting like the person that you want to be. You have to start acting like the person you want to be in order to become the person you want to be. So I put this in context. Like, if you want to be the person with six-pack abs, you can't wait until you become the person with six-pack abs to do the things that person does, right? You have to first start doing the things that person does in order to get the result, right? So if you want to become wealthy, you can't wait to become wealthy to start doing the things that wealthy people do. You have to start doing the things that wealthy people do in order to become wealthy. right? It's the law of prerequisites. You have to do the things that lead to the result, right? That's why I do what I do. I share this because I want you to succeed, because I hate the government and I don't want you to send them a single penny more than they absolutely have to get from you, because I believe that the dollars are better in your hands than theirs. I just think you'll do way better things for society as a whole. Right? I'm not naive to believe that I can change the world for the better myself. But I think collectively, we could all get together and do well for each other so that those dollars can be put to good works locally. Right? You can invest them, you can hire people, you can better your clientele, your customer base. You can do better things for them. You could serve them better. You can invest those dollars with your family to raise your family's standard of living. Right? You can invest it in your local community to improve your local community. Like, the dollars are just better in your hands than anyone's in Washington, D.C.'s. Right? That's just my fundamental belief system. So that's why I do what I do. And I'm sharing this context here with you so that you understand why the Trump versus Powell situation is so critically important for you to pay attention to. Because what is about to unfold is an opportunity that you don't want to miss out on. Why? Because the reality is, as interest rates get cut, that means there's going to be an opportunity for you to take advantage of that in a variety of different ways. Right? A variety of different ways. Let's imagine for a moment that you already have debt. Right? Let's say you have debt, and I'd argue that if you're listening to this and you're here in the United States, many of you do, right? Because debt is part of the fabric of the United States ecosystem. But if that is the case, there could be an opportunity to refinance some of that debt for a little bit more favorable rates. Now, some of you have debt that was issued many years ago that has amazing rates, so refinancing is not likely in the near future for you. But as the cost of capital comes down, that may give you an opportunity to say, hey, listen, maybe I should jump in to getting back into this ownership economy rather than waiting until the prices catch up with the fact that the cost of capital has come down. Right? If the cost of capital comes down, that means there's more possibility for people to get access to capital to go out and buy things, and those things then mean that more people are competing for them, so prices tend to go up. Right? So you may leave opportunity on the table if you wait too long. And the reason I share it this way is because if you're focused on, again, if you're anything like me, you're probably focused on winning. Winning across the board, whether it's winning in business, winning in finances, winning in life, right? And my measure of winning has nothing to do with revenue, right? I think revenue is just a vanity metric. I don't care how much money you make. I care about how much you keep, right? And I care about that net, not gross mentality in all of its dimensions. It's not just about tax reduction, which is something I teach business owners how to do. It's not just about asset protection, which is, again, another pillar that I teach business owners how to capitalize on. It's not just about wealth accumulation, although that's a significantly important pillar. And then it's not just about legacy. Again, another significant pillar. But when you bring all of those four pillars together, that results in generational wealth. And that is the measure of winning. Like, that is success in business and in life. If you create generational wealth, it's hard to argue that you have not succeeded. Now, you may not have succeeded in every aspect of life, but that is a significant measure of success, right? Generational wealth, because now you have financial freedom. And this is a critically important component, right? The whole concept of financial freedom, critically important. And it's simply a formula. Like, if you want to create financial freedom, well, let me ask you this, because I don't want to spend time on something that you guys don't care about. Would you guys like to know the formula for financial freedom? Put FF, two Fs, FF in the chat if you want to know the formula for financial freedom. Like, again, I don't want to spend time on stuff that you guys don't care about. This is your live session, not just as much as it's mine. So let me know in the chat. Do you want to know the formula for financial freedom? FF in the chat if you want to know it. Got a lot of FFs. Love it. Oh, Romaine already knows it. Okay, so Romaine, maybe you've heard some of my content before. Well, financial freedom. Again, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. I've had the pleasure of working with some of the wealthiest families in the country. One of the companies I own is a private wealth management firm. So think like private family office type of ecosystem. So true wealth, right? I've had that pleasure of being able to work with individuals who have amassed wealth and safeguarded that wealth. And the concept of financial freedom is an integral component to that generational wealth goal and objective. Financial freedom is just 10 words, right? The formula for financial freedom is just 10 words. Free cash flow greater than your daily needs and wants, right? That's it. Free cash flow greater than your daily needs and wants. Financial freedom is free cash flow greater than your daily needs and wants. And that's financial freedom, right? And again, the context here, financial freedom, this is the most important freedom to fight for, guys. Most important freedom to fight for. Because it leads to all other freedoms. Financial freedom leads to the freedom of education, the freedom of healthcare, the freedom of mobility, the freedom of security, the freedom of choice. Financial freedom by far is the most important freedom. And again, I get so much hate. You guys don't see a lot of my private DMs that people send to me. Like some of this stuff is ridiculous. Like people really are against capitalism, like in a lot of regards. Like, but the reality is, like, I get that money does not solve all problems. I totally understand that. But you know what? Money is really good at solving money problems. And I don't know about you, but when money problems are solved, most of your other problems get solved with it, right? That just is the byproduct of it. Financial freedom leads to the byproduct of being able to do what you want to do in life and live the type of life you want to live. And when you understand this formula and you understand what's about to unfold, like when interest rates come down, the cost of capital comes down with it. And that gives you access to do a lot of different things. And if you are anything like me and you desire generational wealth, well, you need to be positioned to take advantage of what is about to unfold, right? You need to be positioned to take advantage of what is about to unfold. And that is this concept of the journey of generational wealth. Now, here's what I know to be true. Again, over the course of the past nearly 30 years of me doing what I do, there are 4 pillars that are critically important for you to achieve generational wealth. You have to have an intentional legacy built into your plan, right? You have to have worked to safeguard your wealth for generations, right? To stop erosion from happening one generation to the next. Like it has to be an intentional legacy built into your design. You also have to have some protection mechanisms in play to safeguard your wealth from all of the enemies at the gate, right? All of the enemies at the gate, like the creditors, the litigants, the opportunists who want a piece of your pie, right? That's just the reality. You have to have an asset protection plan to safeguard your wealth. And I speak around the country on the topic of money a lot, right? And inevitably, when I get off stage, people ask me, well, because a lot of people understand that one of the companies I own is a private wealth management firm. So they inevitably come up to me and they say, Edward, how can I make more money? Like, how can I do that? And my number one response, and in every regard, is always the same. Number one thing you can do to make more money is to keep more of what you're already making. Tax reduction, right? Number one, like, again, I get it. You can just go out and make more money, but if your hole in the bucket is there, the tax hole, if you will, you put more water in that bucket, it just means more water pours out the hole. right? You have to plug that profit leak. This tax reduction goal and objective is critically important. But here's where the magic exists within what I teach. Okay, so this is something, if you're anything like me and you want to win in business, you want to win in finance, you want to win in life, you need to pay attention to what I'm about to share with you. Pillar number 4 is the magic sauce, wealth accumulation, right? When you put in intentional legacy, asset protection, and tax reduction, and you pair it with a wealth accumulation mindset, that is what leads you to generational wealth creation. What do I mean by wealth accumulation? What do I mean by wealth accumulation? Well, I have a concept I teach my mentees. It's called compound asset acquisition. Compound asset acquisition. This concept is what has transformed the lives of thousands of business owners. Like, I've been doing what I do for nearly 20 years, 28 years now, right? 28, yeah, nearly 30 years, 28 years. I've helped thousands of business owners across 18 different industries. I've helped high-income W-2 professionals. I've helped real estate investors, right? This concept has been what has made it possible for people to work towards generational wealth creation. Compound asset acquisition. This is what it means. It means when you are keeping more of every single dollar you make, you are giving those dollars a job. Go out in the world and bring more dollars home, right? Because if you don't give your dollars a job, they become the employee of someone else. And I'm going to tell you this, they're not going to be helping you. You're going to be helping them, right? Compound asset acquisition means give every dollar you have a job to go out into the world and bring more dollars home. And what's beautiful about this system is that when you pair it with a tax reduction ecosystem, you're able to say, okay, let me use my tax savings, right? I'm cutting the money that I'm sending to the IRS. I'm reducing it instead of sending it to the IRS, right? So again, let's put this in the context. If your situation is this, and you make a certain dollar amount, let's say you make $500,000, right? And that's your net taxable income. And let's say on average, if you're making $500,000, let's say hypothetically, your tax ecosystem, the money you owe to Uncle Sam is $125K as a hypothetical, right? Now, here's your choice. You can either send it to the IRS, right? Or you can send it over here towards an asset. Which would you rather do? Like, if you had a choice to either send the money to the IRS or buy an asset, which would you rather do? Let me know in the chat. Asset or IRS? Asset or IRS? Like, if you had the choice, where would you put your dollars? Buy, right? Buy the asset. Because the dollars you send to the IRS, there's no return on that. 0%, guys. 0% return on investment. Right? It's a no-brainer, right? But like, no one teaches this stuff when we're kids, right? We don't learn it in the context of a school system. So we learn to become slaves of an ecosystem that is built for people to win if you know the rules. And when you don't know the rules, you just become the individuals who fund their winning. Right? Because no matter what you believe, if you're playing the wrong game, you'll never win. Right? It's impossible. Even if you're playing the right game, but with the wrong set of rules, how can you ever hope to win? Right? Especially when you're playing against people who actually know the rules. The reality is, if you want to win, you have to learn how to deploy your capital, your free capital, your tax savings opportunities that are created towards an asset acquisition environment. And if you can keep more of every dollar, and instead of sending those dollars to the IRS, you could use those dollars to go out and buy assets that potentially cash flow, right? And then what's interesting is that in year 2, after you acquired the first asset. In year 2, now you have the cash flow from the asset you acquired plus your other cash flow. And maybe in year 2, you could buy another asset. So now you have 2 assets. And in year 3, you have cash flow from 2 assets plus your other income. Maybe you could buy 2 assets that year. So now you have 4. Which would mean in year 4, you have 4 income streams from those assets plus your other income. So maybe you could buy another 2 or 3. So maybe you have now 7 assets, right? 7 assets. And the cash flow from those assets plus your other income can be deployed to purchase even more. Now, I get it. There's risk involved in everything. Like, because that's the typical argument I get at this point. Like, people will jump in the chat, or they'll take this segment out of what I'm sharing, and they'll jump on social media and say, Edward, like he's telling people to take too much risk. Well, here's the reality, guys. Again, I'm not saying you should do anything. I'm trying to not should over people all the time. I'm doing my best at that. Let me tell you what my position is. Pretty much everything I want in life is found just on the other side of caution. Right? That's just the reality. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So here's the choice. It's going to be hard. There's risk that you have to take. But there's also risk of not taking risk. Like, what happens if you wake up and it's 10, 15, 20 years down the road and you didn't take any of these types of risks and you don't have anything to show for it? Like, that's hard too. So life is going to be hard either way. Choose your heart. Choose your heart, right? Like, that's just a reality. And again, a lot of people are saying, well, Edward, interest rates where they are today, like I can't even fathom trying to get involved in real estate right now because it's just going to be too expensive. And that's typically because whenever you've learned about real estate investing or business purchasing or whatever it may be, you're typically learning it from someone who has only one dimension of expertise. Maybe the only experience they have is in real estate, or the only experience they have is in business acquisition. Or the only experience they have maybe is in traditional investing, right? In a traditional portfolio, like a financial economy on Wall Street, right? And again, I recognize what I'm talking about may sound strange because it's coming from someone who owns a private wealth management firm. But I also own real estate, and I also own a consulting firm, and I also guide business owners and entrepreneurs and W-2 professionals all across the country in their journeys toward the creation of generational wealth. So having a multidisciplinary approach, again, I'm biased in that regard. I recognize that, like, I'm not naive. But having a multidisciplinary approach is way better because when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if all you're doing is talking to an asset protection attorney, well, then all they're going to do is talk about asset protection. And if you're only talking to an asset protection attorney who specializes in offshore asset protection, that's what they're going to argue is the best thing in the world. And if you're talking to a tax attorney and they're talking about tax strategy, all they're going to do is argue about the context of a tax strategy in a court case and a ruling and these regulations from a guidance standpoint. That's all you're going to get. You're not going to necessarily get the flavor of having how one aspect of your life interplays with another. That's why you want to sit down and talk either with all of those separate individuals with someone who can coordinate them, or find someone who you can work with and trust that actually can put you on the path to having an integrated approach so that the things that you're doing in the asset protection aspects of your life are melding well with the things you're doing for wealth accumulation. And they're working in tandem with the stuff that you're doing in tax reduction, right? That's what I'm talking about with regard to everything I'm sharing. Because when you look at this concept of going ahead and taking advantage of what's about to unfold, right? If I am correct, right, and interest rates are coming down, and again, the velocity of that rate cut ecosystem is still unknown, right? The 90%, the marketplace, not Edward. Now, the markets are pricing in a 90% probability of a 25 basis point rate cut in September, right? Like if you look at the broad markets right now, that's what's being priced in to that marketplace. And if we look at that and we understand that there is this opportunity for rate cuts to occur, and we want to look at how does this actually play into decision making? Like, again, this is where the rubber meets the road, guys. Like, if you're watching and you've been with me now for the past hour or so, it tells me that you are interested in taking action. So I want to give you information, or at least context, with which you can go back to the people you trust to help implement, right? To get this stuff implemented in your life. Within our ecosystem, I teach my community about how to actually analyze deals, right? So we do, again, asset protection, tax reduction, legacy planning, wealth accumulation, but part and parcel to that is understanding and recognizing when a deal is a deal, right? Like, and what makes a deal. So let's just talk about the context of real estate. I was looking at a particular deal earlier today, and again, I've anonymized the information because I don't want you guys to go out and buy it before I do. Okay, that's just the reality. But this is the context, right? It's a $1.4 million property. You may say, well, Edward, I could never afford a 1.4, because that's like the type of retort I get when I have these sessions. Well, the numbers are what the numbers are, right? You can add zeros to them. You can take zeros away. It's not magic. It's just math, right? So I'm not trying to teach you something so advanced that you can never implement, right? Just don't get distracted by the number of zeros that Edward Collins is talking about, because it's not magic, it's math. You can translate this to any context, any dollar amounts, whether it's 1.4 million or $140,000, right? Like, it's the same mathematical principles at work. I'm showcasing something that I was looking at earlier today. That's what I'm sharing it the way I am. So in this context, it's a pocket deal. So a real estate agent who has not yet listed this property on the market, but I know and I'm able to have a communication with. It's about 6,100 square feet. Again, that's not critically important for this analysis. Built in 2021. The current risk-free rate. Okay, I share this in this context because I want you to understand. Again, maybe I'll make this a little bit larger so you guys can see it a little better. Anytime I, Edward Collins, am making a decision regarding deploying my capital, right? Capital allocation decisions toward the productive use of that capital, meaning putting that capital to work to go out in the world and find friends. I analyze that decision within the context of comparing it to a risk-free scenario. Like, if I did nothing, took no risk, what could I get back on my money? And right now, U.S. Treasury bills, 3-month Treasury bills, are returning about 4.13%, right? On average, right? And those are commonly referred to as risk-free investments because the government has the ability to just print more money, so you're definitely going to get paid back on the dollars, right? That you invest in treasuries, right? That's why they're referred to colloquially as the risk-free investment. So the risk-free rate is 4.1% approximately. So I'm always evaluating my decisions related to investments with that as the comparison. I can invest in A or in the risk-free rate B, which is the better use of my capital, within the overlay of how much work and effort am I going to have to do? Like, how much is it going to impact my life by making this investment decision, right? So I take that context into play and I evaluate it. And in this environment, again, I'm just doing this. I'm not going to offer full rate on this. If I do put an offer in, I'm not going to offer full. I'm going to come back and I'm going to negotiate, because in many areas, especially in this particular region that I'm looking at, this particular asset, it's much more of a buyer's market at the moment than it is a seller's market. So I'm going to have a little bit more control. But just in the context of this analysis, we're looking at this a potential $1.4 million offer environment. And in the context of this, I'd probably put about 25% down towards the acquisition of this property, which would mean I'd have a total debt environment of about $1,050,000, right? And that would be essentially traditional financing of some sort. And in this context, the interest rate ecosystem the way it is, let's assume that it's a 7.5% interest rate at 30 years, just to put it into context. Now, most commercial notes are going to be priced with a term of 20 years or less. And And that might be even a higher interest rate environment. You'd have to obviously analyze what rates are like in your local ecosystem with regard to the resources that you have access to, right? But again, I'm just showcasing this to illustrate the value of understanding the impact of interest rates, right? So what this shows us is that the monthly payment for this note outstanding would be about $7,300 per month, right? In order to pay back $1,050,000 at 7.5% over the course of the next 30 years, right? So that's what this math is showing us. And if we evaluate this particular property, and I'm assuming that I'm going to put this property on the short-term rental market. And again, I'm doing that because I want to take advantage of some other tax benefits that are associated with short-term rentals, specifically exceptions to the passive activity loss rules. So that's why I'm evaluating this particular type of real estate deal from this lens, right? And I'm assuming that this particular property is not going to be fully occupied 100% of the time, right? There's going to be some downtime between guest stays, and I want to be very conservative here. The marketplace is showing that it's about a 70% occupancy rate, so I'm cutting that nearly in half, and I'm saying that this is only going to be occupied 40% of the time, so that over the course of the year, only 146 days of the year will it be occupied. And the average rental rate in that area is about $1,600. I'm discounting the average rental rate to about $1,275 per night. Again, this is a larger property, very luxurious type of amenities and features within the property. So it demands a little bit higher, and it is likely really situated well for event venue use, right? So that's the context of what's being analyzed here, right? So I'm understanding that the monthly amount that I could potentially bring in, given this 40% occupancy rate and a $1,275 daily stay, is about $7,342 per month, right? Oh, $15,515 per month minus the $7,342, right? So it helps to put it into context that I am also going to have some other expenses that are associated with it, and about $325 of other monthly fees that are associated with it, some minor utility expenses, property taxes, homeowners insurance, cable and internet services, cleaning fees, right? Like the stuff that is going to be out of pocket for me, which will result in a net operating income per month. This will cash flow approximately $2,500. Now, this is not a guarantee. And if you're taking this, anything I'm sharing tonight as a guarantee, you're doing yourself a disservice. This is not a guarantee of any amount of money that anyone could ever make, right? The vast majority who listen to my content will make zero because you will not actually do anything with the information that I share. That's just the reality. And if this were a presentation that I were doing live, on the screen would show up like an FTC notification that the vast majority of people don't actually get results because they don't do the things that they should be doing in order to get outcome, right? But this showcases that on an annual basis, this particular property has the potential for me, within the parameters that I'm evaluating, about a $30,000 annual net operating income, right? So that, again, gives you context with regard to what this particular property could do for me in my situation. Again, it's not magic, it's just math. So you can change the numbers, you can evaluate things at a much smaller acquisition price. You can evaluate the acquisition at a larger rate, right? Maybe it's $11 or $14 million acquisition or $140 million acquisition, like whatever it may be, right? You're just adding zeros or taking zeros away. You could evaluate this within a similar model, right? And understanding how this plays out. But I'm also going to know that there's some costs that are associated in year one that are a little bit abnormal. Like I'm going to have probably somewhere around $42,000 of closing costs that are associated with this particular property if I do indeed close. I'm going to have another $27,840 of actual renovation costs to get this property available to be put into service, right? There's some light cosmetic renovations that are going to be needed for me to do, and it's going to cost about $27,000 for me to do that, almost $28,000. And I'm also going to have to do a cost segregation study on this property if I want to take advantage of it the way I want to in order to get some tax reduction opportunities out of it, right? Again, when I'm thinking about this from a planning standpoint, the context of this particular strategy is showcasing me that based on the One Big Beautiful Bill being signed into law back in July 4th, 2025, bonus depreciation has come back into the play with 100% bonus depreciation being available. And within the context of residential real estate, on average, about 1/3 of the improved value of the property you acquire, because land is never depreciable, right? So in a $1.4 million property, I'm estimating that about $400,000 of that is land value. So we're talking about $1 million of improved value, like the building upon the land, right? The improvements upon the land. About 1 million. About 1/3 of that is going to be available for this thing called bonus depreciation, which is an ability to take a deduction in year one to that amount, right? 33%. And that also includes additional what's called qualified improvement aspects, like the cosmetic renovations that I'd be doing on the property. That would mean that I have the potential for a $361,000 deduction when I acquire this property, which would mean, given an effective tax rate of about 32% for many, right? My effective tax rate is much lower than that because I utilize other strategies, but I wanted to try to keep this in context, right, for those, so that the vast majority of people can understand what I'm talking about. If that were the case, that would mean a tax savings of approximately $115,000 in year one. Like, you heard that correctly, $115,000 of tax savings in year one. So when I'm analyzing this, that is information that is valuable to know. Now, there's other things to be considered, things like repairs and maintenance that you have to make sure you have an amount in reserve to handle those expenses when they come up, vacancies when they happen, capital expenditure reserves, like if I have to replace a hot water heater or a roof, right? I want to have money that's set aside to be available to meet those burdens if and when they come up, right? Because that's just the reality of owning real estate, guys. Like, if you don't know that by now, oh my goodness, right? But having reserves means I'm setting aside about $20-some-odd thousand per year of the amount of cash flow that property is generating. So in the context of everything I've shared, like the amount of financing that I'd be doing, the cost of capital right now, that's 7.5% if I was using that as the average rate for acquisition. Right now, I was looking at traditional financing earlier today, and the national average right now is about 6.5%. So I went even up higher than that, 7.5% in the context of this illustration. Well, that would mean my monthly carry costs for everything would be about almost $13,000. My total out of pocket to acquire this in year one would be about $427,000. So a cap rate would be, if I were to buy this thing all cash, what would the net operating income result in? Like what would my return on that all cash purchase be? Well, in the context of what's being shared here, it would be about a 7% return. And on average, you want to look at somewhere between, again, there's no such thing as an ideal cap rate, but I typically want to look at something that's falling between 4 and 8%. If the cap rate is higher than 8%, well, that could mean that there are other risks that are involved. If it's much lower than 4%, that may be actually a good thing, because maybe that just means it's very, very conservative numbers, and your likelihood of fluctuation from that is unlikely. Like, that's pretty rock solid with regard to what your NOI is going to be. Not a lot of fluctuation from there. Again, there's a lot of things that inform cap rate, but I use cap rate as a measure, like where should it be? And on average, I'm looking for cap rates somewhere between that 4 and 8% mark. But my cash on cash return for year one, meaning my out of pocket plus the amount of net operating income I get in the context of this illustration, is only 2.4%. And remember what I said earlier, that I always evaluate every financial decision and investment decision. I evaluate that based on the risk-free rate. Like, this means I'd be getting 2.4% and potentially have to deal with the headache of clogged toilets, right? Or tenants damaging property, right? That's a headache, right? Is it worth it? Whereas I could just put it into 3-month treasury bills and get 4.1%, right? So if this were the only thing I would be evaluating, I'd probably say, I'm going to pass, right? Because I'd just put it into treasury bills and not have to worry about anything, right? It's risk-free. But in the context of taking a risk, I want to understand more than just this cash-on-cash return, because I also get tax savings in year one, right? So when I factor in the tax savings as well, my cash on cash return plus tax savings in year one is nearly 30%, guys. That's why real estate, when looked at through the lens, multidisciplinary lens, is so powerful, right? Because that's just year one. Now you may say, well, Edward, yeah, but in year two, my ongoing cash on cash return is only 2.4%. Well, in year two, maybe you can refinance and get better return, right? Like we're a year into this potential rate declining ecosystem. So even if it costs you more to acquire the real estate in year one, you're getting a 30% return in year one almost in this illustration, which may give you the time to figure out the financing arm to make this more attractive. And you may say, well, Edward, how does it make it more attractive? Well, let's look. Let's assume for a moment that we change the interest rate from 7.5%, right? 7.5%. Let's see if I can get this to work correctly. Let's say we can cut it by 2%. Let's say it's 5.5% over the course of, let's say, the next 2 years. Well, what happens? Guys, things improve. Things improve. 33%. First year cash on cash return. Every year thereafter, 6.28%. Right? This is where the rubber meets the road. This is why you want to sit down with people who actually understand the context of making decisions in your life, especially decisions that impact your financial future. Right? Let's say over the course of the next, 3 years, instead of 2%, you can cut it by 3%. Right? Now you're talking about over 8% year after year, traditional cash on cash, and in year one, it's 35%. Like, guys, this is something that is hugely powerful, because not only does this happen, I want you to understand something that's truly remarkable about real estate. And again, I typically reserve this for my ecosystem, the mentees that are part of what I do. We have a variety of different programs where we teach people how to put themselves onto a path of generational wealth creation. But I'm going to share it with you guys. Are you guys still with me? Are you picking up what I'm sharing tonight? Is this something of value to you? Let me know in the chat. Are you getting value from this? Say up level if you're getting value from what I'm sharing tonight. Up level in the chat. You got some up levels. Up levels. Let me know in the chat. Are you getting value from what I'm sharing? Is this resonating with you? Let me know in the chat. Are you getting some value from what I'm sharing? Awesome. Getting some up levels. I love it. Jason, I see you. I see you there, Jason. Love it. So within the context of real estate, there's this amazing thing. You go out and you acquire real estate, right? Point one. Over time, and again, this is not a guarantee, guys, but over time, on average, real estate tends to go up in value, right? Again, I can't guarantee anything, but it tends to go up in value over time. And when you're using real estate from a real estate investment standpoint, you're putting a tenant in that property. And that tenant, over time, is paying down the debt, right? And they're paying down the debt through their rent payment. And the beautiful, interesting thing is this space in here is what I call the equity delta. Equity delta, right? This equity delta is the building of equity with you doing nothing. Right? You just own the asset. And over time, the asset appreciates in value. Again, I can't guarantee that. But over the long period of time, real estate on average tends to go up in value. And your tenant is paying down the debt, thereby creating equity expansion, that equity delta ecosystem. And the beautiful thing is you can borrow those dollars out of equity and pay zero tax on that borrowing. because borrowed dollars are not tax dollars. You could 1031 this into another property, maybe a bigger and a better property, because maybe you're looking to make sure that your return on your cash on cash return is constantly in expansion mode, not in complacency mode, right? There are things that you could do to potentially open up even more depreciation with a 1031 exchange than you'd be able to take advantage of if you just hold on to the property indefinitely. Right? There are lots of things that could be evaluated, but when you do things the right way, you can actually get outcomes that matter. Right? You can get outcomes that matter. And if you are taking advantage of the information that I'm sharing and you're putting it into practice, you want to make sure you're doing so in and with the right infrastructure in play, right? The right infrastructure in play. When you look at your financial life, there are 4 spectrums of assets and income: personal, non-passive, passive, and portfolio. Pretty much everything in your life falls into one or more of those categories. And they're separated because different income is treated different ways from a tax perspective, and different assets are impacted by different types of risk, right? So those 4 spectrums, you have to really design your financial life in the right way within the context of those spectrums. And that's what I teach business owners how to do. Would you guys like to learn how to do that? Would that be of interest to you? Let me know in the chat. Write learn in the chat if you want to learn how to put the right infrastructure in play so that you can get amazing outcomes, so that you can 1, protect your wealth, 2, keep more of every dollar that's being made, 3, make sure that those dollars are going out into the world making more money for you, and 4, pass on those dollars with intention, right? Make sure that it goes to the people and the causes you care about. Like, type learn in the chat if you'd be interested in learning more about how to put the right infrastructure in play. Got some learns. Michael's been chatting. I see you, Michael. I appreciate you adding flavor to this ecosystem. Chris says learn. Jason, learn always. Jason, I know your position, man. I know you're always here to do that. I know you're here to do that. So when it comes to this ecosystem of learning, I teach this thing called the Real Wealth Matrix, which is really the ideal hierarchy of ownership, and it allows us to build out a blueprint for business owners' lives, for high income W-2 professionals, for real estate investors, putting the right structures in play in different aspects of their life, right? This real wealth matrix ecosystem. And if you'd be interested in learning more about how this works and how this structure can be put into your life, I'm hosting a wealth wisdom workshop, and we're going to be covering this. And if you'd be interested in attending it, all you have to do is my team's going to put the link in the chat for you guys to register. You want to make sure that you register because we don't have unlimited spots. There's a number of spots that are there. The investment is the investment of your time, right? That's the only investment you have to make. You have to invest your time to be there because it's live. It's a live workshop. But if you'd be interested in coming and attending and learning more about the blueprint, more about how the real wealth matrix is utilized by individuals who are in the know, right? Be sure to be there live so that I can help you understand why we're doing what we're doing and how things like taking advantage of potential interest rate reduction happening. Like if you don't have the right infrastructure in place, you're going to be missing out, right? Because this ecosystem, this masterclass, the real wealth matrix itself, this is what the wealthy are actually using. Like again, you've probably seen me react on social media to the supposed financial gurus that are out there, right? And I like the stuff that gets shared on social media is just absolutely ridiculous at times. And so many people talk about what the wealthy actually do. And the reality is they have no context. They've never sat down with a wealthy person and asked a wealthy person what's going on in their life, right? They're just making commentary. I have actual experience working with wealthy families, uber wealthy families, for decades. I've helped install this blueprint, design it and deploy it. These generational wealth systems, design them and deploy them within thousands of people's lives across 18 different industries when I'm talking about entrepreneurs. right? Across all different types of real estate investors, whether we're talking about investors in raw land, investors in commercial properties, investors in industrial or manufacturing property, investors in residential real estate, multifamily, single family, midterm, short-term, long-term rentals, right? Like, I've been doing this for decades, guys. And if you want to learn a shortcut, you should definitely listen to the people who have achieved what you're looking to achieve. Stop taking advice from people who you would not happily swap lives with, right? Like that's the lesson to be learned here. There's a lot of supposed financial gurus out there. My question for you is, would you happily swap your life with theirs, right? Have they actually achieved what it is that you're looking to achieve? And if not, stop listening to them. My goal and objective for you is to share information, share it so that you can evaluate the value, and then go back to the people that you trust in your life and implement. Because no matter how much you learn, all that does is lead to education. But if you want transformation, you must take action, because all outcomes require action first. So take the action, register to attend the Wealth Wisdom Workshop, this concept of the real wealth matrix and how to deploy it in your life, how to understand why it's important, understand why I do what I do and how I do it, so that you could get results for yourself. Fair enough? I hope this has been of value, guys. I hope this has been of value. Can't click on the link or copy it? Interesting. Fabian, if you're having trouble, send a message to info@uplevelentrepreneur.com. My team, maybe they can send you an email with a clickable link. But the goal and objective here is to get outcome. The only way to get outcome is take action, right? Take action, jump in, register for this workshop. The only investment you have to make is the investment of your time to be there. It's live. So if you're not there, you're not there. It is what it is, okay? But if you want outcome, I'll see you on the workshop. Until next time, be well. Bye for now.